Now to configure dynamic ARP inspection, you have to, of course, have an error in the slides. You have to make sure that snooping is enabled. Otherwise, you have to do static IP to make bindings for ARP inspection to be used. And of course, that's a nightmare. It's not scalable. So this feature makes sense only for VLANs that actually have DHCP functional, not in the VLANs where your clients are statically assigned IP addresses. So you're going ahead and this time you just globally enable dynamic ARP inspection for the required VLAN. And then, of course, you're going to have at least one IP address which is statically assigned in the VLAN, which is going to be your default gateway. So on the switch ports where you have the default gateway configured, connected, or any other hosts in the subnet that have static IP addresses, you have to go in there and configure the port as dynamic ARP inspection trusted, like it was the case with DHCP snooping. Another option would be, so when you're going to go ahead and configure the switch port facing your default gateway or any other connected host that have static IP addresses, when you go and configure those ports as trusted, just like in the case of DHCP snooping trusted, then in this case the switch is no longer going to inspect any ARP packets received inbound on a trusted dynamic ARP inspection port. So it means that because we have connected, we have statically assigned hosts on those interfaces, it means that any ARP packets back and forth from those hosts are going to be allowed by the switch. Because otherwise, if you don't do this, then you're going to lose connectivity with all hosts which have static IP addresses in that subnet. So if you don't want to configure those ports as trusted, another option, which is a bit more complex, is kind of like a CCNP topic probably. You have to go on the switch and configure, as I was saying, static MAC to IP bindings in what is called an ARP access list, and then configure the dynamic ARP inspection to make use of that ACL in there. And of course, finally, verify your configuration. So let's see, we're going to go ahead and use the same setup since we have the DHCP snooping configured. So this time I'm going to go on VLAN 96, enable dynamic ARP inspection, which means initially all ports will be untrusted from the inspection point of view. On this port facing PCA, because PCA was dynamically assigned, I have an entry in the DHCP snooping table. But for this port facing router 2, because router 2 has a static IP address, there are no entries in the DHCP snooping table. So if I just configure dynamic ARP inspection and I clear the ARP cache on test PCA, I'm going to see that I lose connectivity with router 2 at IP level because ARP will no longer work. So I'm going to go ahead on this port to fix that up and configure this as trusted from the dynamic ARP inspection point of view. Because on that port I have connected devices where that have static IP address assigned, which means I'm not going to have in the DHCP snooping table IP to MAC interface bindings for those hosts. So let's go on switch 1. First of all, let's confirm that the feature is disabled by default. Show IP ARP inspection. So it is not active or enabled VLAN on switch. So it's not enabled. So let's go and say IP ARP inspection VLAN 96. So if you say do show IP ARP inspection, then now it states that it is enabled for VLAN 96. You see in here on the first row it states that for VLAN 96 it is enabled and active. That's the only line you need to know for the CCNA exam, I would say. And all of it, as you can see, it says in here that in VLAN 96 I have forwarded 2 ARP packets, so those were valid. It means I found the R payload content in the my snooping table, but one of them was dropped. And I already see messages saying that inbound on port 105 invalid ARPs in there. This is because the problem is, and I'm gonna fix this up, it was the same as we've seen in the first days with another topic, still with DHCP. This is because the client has an address of 51 test PCA, but actually the switch believes it is something else. The switch believes is DHCP snooping binding. The switch believes it is going to be 53. So let's go on test PCA and confirm that. Let's open up command prompt. ipconfig. And let's look it up on the IP address. There we go. It is 51. This is because of the fact how DHCP works. So the switch didn't actually see the proper IP address leads to the client for the following reason, and we're going to fix that up in a couple. Because test PCA, when I shuttered the PC, test PCA was assigned the IP address of .53. So when I enable the port facing test PCA has sent a request to the server saying I want the address of .53, because the PC is going to say I want to keep that address. The switch sees that message and is going to put that in the binding in the snooping table. So it's going to put in a snooping table that the address of 53 maps to the MAC address of test PCA. Now, Router 2, because I have cleared the DHCP binding entries on the DHCP server, Router 2 is going to say negative. I cannot use that IP address because it has not been leased before, because the PCA is going to just request a refresh of the address, not a new address. It's going to say negative. It's going to say I'm going to offer you .51. But because now this reply is being received by the switch on a port which is configured as trusted in here, as trusted, in order to accept the HTTP server packets, the switch doesn't intercept the replies from the server. And then the client is going to say, okay, give me that address. It's going to say just okay. I'm going to be okay with that address. So the switch never has a chance to actually see that the server has actually released to the client the address of 51, not the address of 53. So if I want to fix this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on switch 1, shut the port. And this is going to now force the client to request an address of 51 as a refresh, which this time the DHCP server is going to say, okay, I'm going to refresh, I'm going to release you that same address, because that's actually the address which was leased to the client. And there we go. It is actually 53, okay. And switch 1 has currently a binding of 51 probably. But this is going to be fixed with a new request. Snooping binding. Oh, it is okay. 53 and 53. But however, the client is using 51. Let's shut a port. So somehow the client actually got stuck in a weird state. Let's say shut. Let's go on the client and make sure it is going to get an address of 53 this time. Once the link is going to come up, Okay, it says identifying, let's see, CLC and IP config. It is interesting, it still has 51. Okay, let's wait for the link to come up successfully. It still says identifying. Okay, let's make sure it doesn't have static IP addresses. It shouldn't, because I've seen the bindings on router 2. So let's just disable the NIC card. It's faster than doing a release and a renew. Just disable the NIC card manually and then re-enable it. And it should have no more IP addresses leased. It should now request it should start over a new DHCP process message. Still says 51. That's interesting. Okay, let's do the following. CLC. So the PC is stuck in a weird state. ipconfig /release and then renew. This is a VM, so even if I have shuttered, unshuttered the port of the switch, disabled, re-enabled the NIC card, it still kept the old IP address of 51, the old leased one, which it shouldn't. Especially because the DHCP server has actually leased the address of 53, as we've seen in there. So let's see what happens. There we go, reassign a 51. So the client is kind of like sticky, it still wants that address. It makes sense on a release to refresh the address actually, but it didn't make sense that when I have shut down the NIC card on both the switch and the client, it didn't actually lose the IP address. But either way. So let's make sure that also, let's make sure, because now the client uses that address of 51, let's make sure that the binding on switch on the DHCP binding has been updated as well. Do show IP DHCP snooping binding. Do show IP DHCP snooping binding. Oh, it has 2 leases, so it's okay now. One shouldn't be there. Show IP DHCP snooping binding. Show IP. Okay. So now it's all fixed on the PC side. The problem now is with the default gateway, FA1020, and the IP address of .2. This is the default gateway. This is router 2, the default gateway. That's the MAC address of router 2. So what happens now is that because testpca I have flapped the NIC card of testpca. What happens is testpca sends broadcast ARP replies, which of course are going to be forwarded by the switch to all ports. ARP request, not ARP replies, ARP request, asking what is the MAC address of router 2, my default gateway. Router 2 receives that message. It's going to say, there we go, this is my MAC address, ARP request, ARP reply. This is my IP to MAC binding, ARP reply. But this time the switch, because it receives an ARP reply message about the IP to MAC binding of router 2, which doesn't have those in the snooping table, and also this port is untrusted. So it means it's going to inspect all our packets received on untrusted ports, compare them with the DHCP snooping table. In this case, because it doesn't find a mapping of the between the payload of the ARP reply of the router and the DHCP snooping binding table, because router 2 has a static IP address. Then it's going to drop the ARP replies from router 2, and this is what we see in there. So if you go on the client now and you say, let's close this up and open up a new till PC recovers. To make sure that this doesn't work, let's go on router 2 and say show IP ARP include 51. I should see that router 2 cannot map the client's IP address to a MAC address, because any ARP requests or any ARP packets sent by router 2 in the network are going to be dropped by switch 1, because they're being received on an untrusted port, and switch 1 doesn't have an IP to MAC binding of router 2. So let's clear this entry because it's from a long time ago. Clear IP ARP. This. Clear IP ARP. Of course, the IP address. And now let's look it up again. Okay, let's grab the link. There we go. If you say debug ARP and you say ping that address, repeat 1. The ARP request is being sent. The switch wraps it. Let's do one more ping to confirm that router 2. So packets are being dropped inbound as received from router 2. Undebug all. Show IP ARP. For whatever reason, it showed up. Let's see if this is the MAC address from the binding, show IP DHCP binding. And it is that one. Let's see if I can ping 51. Doesn't work because the PC doesn't have an IP to MAC binding to the router. It's interesting that the router was able to do the mapping of the client's IP to MAC, but the client is not able to do that. Show IP DHCP, show IP ARP inspection. Show IP ARP inspection. So forward dropped. Show IP DHCP snooping binding. Oh, that's the. So there you go. We clarified this up. So this is the probably the IP address leads to the IP phone, because that's not a MAC address. I don't understand initially why we were seeing 2 IPs in there, because it's from different MAC addresses. Because on that port of FA105, I have also an IP phone connected. If you look it up on the diagram, here's the IP neighbors. So on port 105, I have an IP phone, and behind the IP phone, I have the test PC. Either way. So we see that the switch drops the ARP messages which are received from router 2 as expected, and that's why router 2 is not able to ping test PC. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on switch 1 and configure the port which faces router 2, which has a static IP address for which the switch doesn't have a entry in the DHCP snooping table, and configure this one to be trusted. Interface FA1020 IP ARP inspection trusted. And now if you say show IP ARP inspection, then you're going to see that the interface becomes trusted. Show IP ARP inspection, I think, is trusted in interfaces. Either go interfaces, and you should see that all of them are untrusted except port 20. There we go. So now router 2 should be able to ping router 1 test PCA, because now the ARP functions both ways, and also the PC is able to resolve its default gateway. And there we go.